Moving on to topic number two for tonight, which is going to be the Iranian protests. So we go from Russian protests to Iranian protests. Now, I'm not one of those people that blanketly thinks that Iran is equivalent to North Korea. I'm fully aware that that country is an actually functioning country at this point, and they've got a lot more going on than just being like the Middle East bastard child. Having said that, um, the morality police, which is literally what they're called, um, have created themselves a problem because their job is to go around and make sure that the women of Iran are wearing the properly the properly state the proper state approved hijab clothing. And if they're not, they are to be detained. They are to be released into uh, the next male of the family that they can get a hold of, whether it be a husband or a father or an uncle, whatever male they can get a hold of. And in the meantime, between when they are detained and when they are released, they are to be taught about the correct way to dress given the lessons written in the Quran. However, while from all reports coming out of Iran, this is what happens most of the time. Women are detained for not wearing the proper hijab, proper coverings in public, and then they are released later unharmed. We don't know how accurate these reports are because Iran is not exactly transparent with this stuff. But as the independent reporting, as limited as it is out of Iran, seems to indicate that most of the time women are detained and they are released unharmed, if not shaken, and definitely been given some propaganda. But the Iranian morality police have done themselves a doozy because they have simultaneously done a hate crime, a murder, and and set off a and a backlash against one of the like three tenets of government law that everybody has to follow in Iran, and they've done it all at the same time because they detained a Kurdish woman, and the Kurds are they're a minority in Iran that is they're discriminated against in many different ways at the societal level and the governmental level, and a Kurdish woman went to I forget what the freaking capital of Iran is. Let's try this. Let's look it up then, shall we? Tehran. That's it. Okay. All right. My bad. So, a Kurdish woman has gone to Tehran, and while she was there, she was not wearing the proper hijab, and she was detained by the morality police, and consequently received life-threatening blunt force trauma to her head, and was pronounced dead upon arrival at a hospital. The morality police have released a statement saying that she had a heart attack and a stroke in custody and died of natural causes, which does not jive with all of the reports that say that she got out of the ambulance, or not ambulance, she got out of the squad car and stumbled into a hair salon and promptly passed out in the hair salon and was pronounced dead later. But the reports say that when she stumbled into the hair salon, she was had her head caved in, for lack of a better term, which means that the morality police murdered a woman for not dressing properly. Now, I don't particularly take to shaming religious people. I don't ascribe to many religious practices. Like in my own life, I tend to like to look at things through the lens of what makes sense, a logical sense, and take the prescriptive nature of religion out of it. I don't think that helps form coherent opinions and coherent worldviews. But I tend not to try to shame people for using that as a barometer for their life, because most people that use that as a barometer for their life tend to be fine people. It's not a hill I'm willing to die on. Having said that, if your religious prescriptions give the police the free rein to beat someone to death for not dressing the way that you want them to dress, you have now crossed a line. You have worked your way into, you are just a religious cult, and you guys are dickheads, and you don't deserve to have political power. It's just as simple as that. This is not a statement of belittling of the Iranian people or the country of Iran or any of the things that has happened to that country by the U.S. doing many stupid things against that country. This is purely a domestic policy. It has nothing to do with us. Even if we were completely on board with making sure that Iran could have whatever kind of government they wanted, whatever kind of relationship they wanted with the rest of the world, if they were even a competing power with the United States, which they're not, but let's say they were, and we were hands off and being like, yes, let's, great, more power to you, which we're not that way. But if we were, and they were doing this, everybody would still, if they were being honest with themselves, be appalled that this was something that is allowed by that government. Like, excuse me? Like, now, having said that, to be fair, it's not illegal in the United States to dress any particular way that you want, provided you're not breaking any, public indecency laws. But, we also have an issue with police here doing stupid things because of how people are dressed. Mostly black people wearing hoodies and getting profiled, pulled over, shot, stuff goes sideways. Like that happens here in the United States. The difference is in the United States, it's not legal to do that because of the outfit. That's a secondary factor in the United States. The main factor is the way the police system in the United States gives power for cops to pull anybody over for what is called probable cause, but probable cause is made deliberately vague, and then the repercussions for getting probable cause wrong are essentially non-existent. So cops can basically pull people over for whatever they want, but they're not allowed to pull them over simply because of how they're dressed. There must be another ulterior motive. So it's illegal to do that. Granted, we don't do a particularly good job of monitoring what the police do, but there are still limits. There were still state rules that we ascribe to as a population to that the police must follow. Again, we don't do a particularly good job at enforcing those rules, but our morality as a country says you cannot arrest somebody because of how they're dressed. So there has to be a greater justification for the police to pull somebody over other than they just had a hoodie on. But in Iran, you can be pulled over, taken into custody, and beaten to death because you're dressing wrong. That's nuts. It just is. It would be nuts anywhere, regardless of the regime in charge, regardless of whatever your ethnic prescriptions are, whatever your culture is in a given country. It's nuts. But because it's state sanctioned, because the state, the government of Iran, has written this into law as something that is allowed to happen, there is no repercussions for it. There's no chance. There's no way to change it without the public uprising. And that is exactly what has happened. So we will flip over here. All right, so protests have happened all over the world over the death of this woman, who her name was, sorry, I should have pulled her name up. That's very that was bad of me. Masa Amini, that's her name. Should have pulled that up ahead of time. I heard it 100 times, but I should have pulled it up so I had it. So Masa Amini was killed by the police. This is the woman that was killed by the morality police. And protests have popped up everywhere in Iran. So the death of 22-year-old Masa Amini in custody after being detained by Iranian military police launched unrest across Iran's provinces and the capital of Tehran. Protests over Amini's death have spread across at least 46 cities, towns, and villages in Iran. State TV has suggested that at least 41 protesters and police have been killed since the protests began. An Associated Press count of official statements by authorities tallied at least 13 dead, with more than 1,200 demonstrators arrested. Running clashes between demonstrators and security forces have continued to erupt. A member of the Basij, a volunteer force with Iran's guards, was killed by protesters last night in Tehran, semi-official Fars news agency reported Sunday. Another Basij member, who is in a coma since Thursday after street clashes, died in Urmia, West Azerbaijan province, on Sunday. The Iranian Foreign Ministry's website said it summoned Simon Shircliffe, the UK's ambassador to Iran, on Saturday and protested the hosting of critical Farsi language media outlets. Okay, so in London, there are some news organizations that report news in Iran. And they're in London because negative coverage of the Iranian regime is illegal in Iran. So some Iranian nationals and some people who care about the situation in Iran, they do their news reporting as best as possible out of London. So that way they can print critical stories. So that's what the Iranian Foreign Ministry is upset about. They're upset that London is still hosting these journalists that are doing negative coverage of Iran. And through this negative coverage is how a lot of this stuff is getting out. They have connections in Iran. They can get a hold of videos. They can write stories based off the insider information that they're getting through personal connections in Iran. And it says right here, Iran said it considers the news agency's reporting to be interference in Iran's internal affairs and acts against its sovereignty. So the Iranian Foreign Ministry thinks that somebody writing negative press coverage about their bad policy, killing a woman and erupting massive protests in response of killing a woman for not dressing properly, is interference in Iran's internal affairs. I don't care. If your internal affairs involve killing a woman for not dressing correctly, then I want the world to know about that. Just like I want the world to know about the horrible things that the U.S. police does. I want everybody to know about this. This is the kind of stuff we're getting the information out and getting the way that these systems behave and the consequences of these systems that countries put in place, including here in America, to a lesser extent, but still. They have bad outcomes. There are no good outcomes for this. None. And nobody should be supporting this. And I have talked to some people. I've talked to some people who have this sort of like blind-eyed view that anything a country does is justified if that country is also in an active antagonistic relationship with the United States. I have seen this argument. I didn't actually think it existed. I didn't actually think that tankies were real. I thought these were guys that were, the couple of them that I heard online, I thought for sure they were just, they probably, some of them I believed had some moral convictions about everything, but it was, I firmly believed that it was mostly just them talking shit, like either to get clout or to get clicks or to get views. But I have met people with no way to profit from their thoughts. And they will look at stuff that comes out of Iran like this. They'll look at stuff that comes out of North Korea like this. They'll look at stuff that comes out of Russia like this. They'll look at the entire the Russia-Ukraine war right now and be like, America's fault. It's fine because, America bad. We had a hand in some part of the political past, or we're currently creating some kind of like economic issue in the country, and that justifies this. Because somehow if America would just stay hands off from everything in the world, that somehow all of these problems would disappear. And I agree that if America went hands off with almost everything that we do in the world, militaristically, if we just went hands off, the net effect of that would probably be positive as far as like the number of lives saved. We've done a lot of damage in the world with our military operations, setting up dictators to overthrow democracies, invading countries just for the sake of like preventing them from going communist and causing millions and millions of lost lives in the process. Keeping countries down because they don't want to play ball with Western business, and throwing around our economic might all over the world and our militaristic might all over the world. I happen to think that the world would potentially be better off if we took a bigger hands-off approach. However, that does not justify this, and I really wish people would separate those two thoughts. Like, countries that are antagonistic to the United States can still be shitty. And this is a good example of it. This is a good example of how this particular policy in Iran that has caused these massive uprisings, has caused the death of potentially 41 people and gotten 1,200. You know how many protesters there has to be to arrest 1,200 protesters? You can't get them all. You can't get all the protesters. You can only get the ones you can get a hold of. And the ones that you can get a hold of is only going to be a small percentage of the people who actually came out to protest. So how many people must there have been to get 1,200 protesters? This is serious. And it's bad. It's not good. And there are people who will defend decisions like this because America bad. Like, don't do that. You can hold two separate thoughts at the same time. You can hold the position that Iran would be better off for its people if America had never intervened, which is probably true. But you can also hold the thought that, given that, setting all that aside, this particular thing is awful. And we should not support it. We should not support anybody, any system, any government body that allows people to be murdered just because they don't dress right. See you later.